Welcome to Boundaries, ladies and gentlemen. This is honestly one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite topics. I love teaching about boundaries because I do strongly believe that boundaries overlap in every single area of life. Okay, and just the way Rick Lawrence was talking about downstairs, he drew basically what Living Faith Alliance Church has, this little circle of blessing. He basically drew the same thing of talking about how if our lives, in the very middle, is just gravitated around Jesus, and the circle of blessing is talking about honoring and obeying. This is for parents, but obeying Jesus for us as adults. If we don't, we get outside in the circle of danger, and that's where God disciplines us to bring us right back into the circle of blessing. So today's going to be all about boundaries. We're going to have some 2 videos that I'm going to show you by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. I have a lot of handouts, but I'm not going to hand them out until the very end because we tend to read them and look at them instead of what we're supposed to be doing here. So, if you do have your notebooks, if you do have pens, I'm going to encourage you to get them out so you can be active listeners. Because I want you to leave here today with information to take home. And I'm going to be throwing a lot of stuff at you, lots of stuff at you. But I will highlight the key points that I want you to take out of here, okay? You're going to hear about the book Boundaries. I really suggest everybody has it on their shelf. It's just simply called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. There'll be articles up here with their name on it as well. And it's when to say yes and when to say no in order to take control of your life. That basically comes out of the scripture that I have up here, Matthew 5:37, which says, make your yes be yes and your no be no. Okay? All right. So everybody's got the book written down. Now, I do want to say this. Beware, if you get it on Amazon or anywhere else, they have this little miniature version. And a lot of my clients bring in this little tiny version this big and they put it in front of me and say, I got the book. And I say, well, I'm not sure we can do anything with that. So therefore, make sure you get the big book, not the little tiny book. That'll be very frustrating for you, okay?
I think it's different colors now, too.
Yes, you're right. This is an old one. You might be able to get this real cheap. Now it's white and red and black, okay, like a little pencil on it and everything like that. All right? All right. What I would like to do is welcome in the Gold family. Come right on in. I saw somebody's head peeking around the corner. Come right on in, folks. Have a seat. All right. I would like to welcome you all. And I also want to begin everything with prayer. So I'm going to ask you to pray with me. God, first of all, we thank you that you are the first author of boundaries. You've given us your word, and the reason you've given us your word is for instructions for life. Plus, you help us to choose well so things will go well for us. And then if we choose poorly, we suffer. So God, I thank you that because of Jesus, Jesus fixed our destiny for failure. Only Jesus fixed it. So God, above all, we're asking that Jesus will rise to his rightful place. We ask that your spirit will just rest in this room. Give us the spiritual wisdom. Give us the spiritual discernment and the spiritual revelation to be able to see what we need to see as parents, as friends, as grandparents, as anyone that's interested in investing into the future generations. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, the first thing I want to do is say, hey, literally, now the first class was a little weak on this. Yep, I'm looking right at the camera, so yeah, a little weak on it. So what I'm asking y'all to do is this. You know how Rick Lawrence was saying, once you start getting filled up with Jesus and your cup is splashing over and it has to splash on somebody else, I all want you to splash. Don't splash too hard. Somebody might have shoulder surgery or something. Just, But look to the person to your right Oh man, you're starting to add up to the first class. Look at and tap them on the shoulder. Do it exuberantly. Exuberantly. Now look at the person to your left and tap them exuberantly and say, hey, you did a good job today. Hey. You practiced a healthy boundary. Why? Because you could have gone somewhere else that God had not appointed you to be at the point of time. You've come into the place He's appointed you to be at the right time.
I can't say that.
There we go. That's okay. But start getting used to that. That's called your splash over. That's right. That's your splash over. Get used to that. Hello. It is great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Now, there we go. We're just going to squeeze right on in there. Now, I don't know about all of you. Oh, you all together? You two together?
No, I just met her.
I was like, I'm going to practice the boundary right up in here right now. You're going to watch me go. We're going to role play. Quick. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a handout?
I will at the very end.
Okay.
Yes, because sometimes when I get handouts, all of a sudden I start looking through them and I miss half the thing.
No, I
So
don't know if there was some.
no, not in your book.
Okay.
No, I'm a renegade that way.
Okay.
Just a renegade on
I'll
it.
stop.
That's good. That's right. Now, I don't know about any of you, but the word boundary was a foreign term to me back in my 20s. Had to pay thousands of dollars to learn what that word boundary was, and because I did not know what the word boundary, no and yes, it really set me up to be hurt by a lot of people, and it also set me up to hurt a lot of people. So therefore I was sinned on, plus I sinned against other people because my character wasn't formed very well. So I invite you, maybe you are all further along than I was, and that will be wonderful. I will glean from you, your splash over. But I'm here to talk to you about what I've learned in boundaries. Now I'm called the Boundary Queen over LFA because I just love boundaries and I'm firm on them. And because when you do learn healthy boundaries, y'all put your little hands up. You're like this. When you're keeping the good in and keeping the bad out. Let's do it again. Keep the good in and the bad out. Just one more time. Keep the good in and the bad out. Okay? So let's go back here. In your circle, you're going to hear the word. Here's some of the key points you're going to take from here. We're going to live on purpose. Write purpose down. Purpose. We're going to live on purpose. We're going to live on a mission. I'm not talking about just like you hear about live missionally. Yes, but this is different. This is you waking up in the morning, you looking at your children or the children you invested in and say, you know something, I'm on a mission here. I'm not just here to enjoy life. I'm on a mission to carry something out. Usually we do that every day. I know when I'm going to Dunkin' Donuts, I'm on a mission. And I'm going and I'm focused and I'm on purpose and I know what I'm going to get and I'm thinking about value meal, everything, bagel, cream cheese, the whole nine. Yes! And here I go. Have the same enthusiasm about every day with your kids. Like, okay, what do I want to plant and what do I want the harvest to look like? Ultimately, as you stay in the middle of that gravitational pull, Jesus is going to show you what your child is supposed to be looking like as you go right along, as you're developing the character. Now, you're going to hear all about this stuff on the videos, plus all these handouts tell you all these things, okay? But I just really want you to focus on what we're talking about, engage. We're going to have a whole half an hour at the end for questions and answers and brainstorming. We're going to do all that, okay? So you're just going to get a lot of stuff, all right? Sound good? First boundary video that we're going to do. Well, before we do that, let's have some fun. A little bit of fun in here. I'm starting to feel a little stiff up in here, so let's have some fun. Somebody holler out what they would think a boundary was. Anything. Boundary.
A fence.
A fence, yes. On the farm, we used to have fences. I had goats, horses, and donkeys. And so therefore, I remember every weekend we had to go out and repair a fence because we wanted to keep the predators out and what we wanted in, the goats, the donkeys, and the horses. Anybody else? Boundary.
Something you're not allowed to have.
Explain.
So, like, you can't have too much candy, or you can't have, like something
Okay.
that's forbidden.
So like a limit.
Okay.
Is that what you mean?
Sure,
Like
yeah.
you're drawing a line? Yes. Matter of fact, Steve, that brings up a very good point. This book on here is going to say when to say yes, when to say no, how to take control of your life by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. A lot of Christian folk will say to me, but Lois, I thought God is supposed to have complete control of your life. And what I let them know is when Lois is not supposed to go to McDonald's and eat a Big Mac with extra sauce on the side, thank you. I've never had God strike the Big Mac out of my hand. Never. He's never done it. So therefore, when to say yes to Subway and when to say no to McDonald's #1 value meal with side sauce would be me taking control of my life. Make sense? Good, because I don't want anybody to walk out of here saying, oh my goodness, what is she teaching here? All right, we're now going to go to boundary video #1. Get ready.
Welcome to Boundaries with Kids. In the opening scenario, Cameron's mom learned a valuable lesson. We often parent in the present without thinking about the future.
Right there.
We usually just deal with the problems at hand. Making it through an afternoon without wanting to send our children to an 8-year camp in Alaska seems like a huge accomplishment. But one goal of parenting is to keep an eye on the future. Remember, we're raising our children to be responsible adults. The issue in any parenting situation is this. Is what you're doing being done on purpose? Or are you doing it from some reasons that you don't think about, such as your childhood, or the need of the moment, or your fears, or your own personality? For example,
Hear that? What he's doing right there, he's pointing back to the parent. I'm saying, hey, are you thinking about how you're parenting? Are you thinking about the purpose you have in mind of what you're trying to bring your child to develop the care? Or are you just not like thinking about it, just reacting in the situation based on like whatever issues you may have inside that you haven't resolved with yourself, any issues, any fears you may have, frustrations, hurts, and it's all coming out and you don't really think about it, okay?
Allison was by nature a helper, and so she gladly helped her son. But remember that parenting has to do with more than the present. You're parenting your child for the future. A person's character is a person's destiny. We want to help you help your children develop the character that will lead them into the life that God created them to have. And healthy boundaries can go far in developing that character. A boundary is a property line that defines a person. It defines where one person ends and someone else begins. If we know where a person's boundaries are, we can know that we can expect this person to take control of himself or herself. We can require responsibility in regard to feelings, behaviors, and attitudes.
Did you hear that? We can actually expect someone to take responsibility for their own feelings, their behaviors, and their attitudes. Okay? And just remember, I have these things written up here for you as well.
A child needs to know where she begins and she ends. She needs to know what she needs to take responsibility for and what she does not need to take responsibility for. If she grows up in relationships where she's confused about her own boundaries, what she's responsible for, and about others' boundaries, what they are responsible for, she doesn't develop the self-control that will enable her to steer through life successfully. But when boundaries are clear, children develop a well-defined sense of who they are and what they're responsible for, the ability to choose, the understanding that if they choose well, things will go well, and if they choose poorly, they will suffer, and the possibility of true love based on freedom. Self-control, responsibility, freedom, love. What could be a better outcome of parenting than that? Welcome.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go with our next boundary, same people, okay? This is now 5 obstacles, but it's a video on overcoming those 5 obstacles, okay? Now remember, there will be a time for questions and answers, so have them ready. Hold on just a second, if you will.
If you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen, goes the old saying. Part of the heat of parenting is tolerating and enduring your child's hatred of your boundaries.
There you go.
You and your child each have a different job here. The kid's job is to test your resolve so she can learn about reality. Your job is to withstand the test, including anger, pouting, tantrums, and maybe much more. Yes, teaching boundaries is difficult, but being aware of 5 obstacles to teaching boundaries may help that challenging course be a little less difficult. The first obstacle is when the parent depends on the child. There is no greater ingredient of growth for your youngster than love. As your child's major source of love, you provide the closeness and intimacy and nurture that sustain her. Yet this closeness can become confused with the parent's need for the child, and this is called dependency. It's the reverse of what the parenting relationship should be about. If you are afraid that if you say no to your kids, that you will lose the love you need from them, then you have a problem. Consider other places where you can get the love that you need. Another obstacle is over identifying with the child. Children need their parents to empathize with their pain, their fear, and their loneliness. But some parents confuse their own painful feelings with their child's and project their problems onto the child. What might be discomfort for the toddler is seen as trauma by the mother. What might be anxiety for the teen is experienced as panic by the father. If you find that you can't bear your child's pain, you may be projecting your pain onto him. Consider both what past issues have not fully healed that may be causing you to over-identify with your child and what you will do to resolve these issues. Third, thinking that love and separateness are enemies is another obstacle. Many parents fear that disagreeing or confronting or simply being different from their children indicates some sort of a break in the connection. But structuring and being separate from your child are not the same as any loss of love. In fact, the reality is that love and separateness go together, and one does not threaten the other. If you feel that when you tell the truth to your child that love is gone, begin working on becoming a truthful, honest person with God and the supportive people in your life. A fourth obstacle is ignoring and zapping. Ignoring and zapping teaches the child that he can persist in whatever he wants because things are not addressed as they happen. He learns that he can get away with murder 9 times out of 10, and he just needs to learn how to endure the out-of-control parent that 1 time out of 10. When the child is zapped, as the parents get more and more frustrated, then he internalizes an angry, attacking voice instead of reality limits along the way. Angry voices are not useful to the child because they cannot become a helpful part of the child's character. They instead become internal critics, or worse, the child either buckles under with guilt and depression or ignores his parents' voices until he gets a zapping of his own making. Finally, just being worn down is an obstacle to maintaining and teaching boundaries. You know, kids just work us and work us and work us, and it's scary how they can sense sometimes when we are weak and ready to give in to them. Well, take a moment to consider why your child might be wearing you down. Perhaps you've let your parenting, which is a temporary job, become your identity. If so, you may need to think about who you are apart from being a parent, about what other interests you have, What are there activities you could do? Kids with parents who have a light learn both that they aren't the center of the universe and that they can be free to pursue their own dreams. Remember, when it comes to training your kids in boundaries, you can't teach what you don't have. Don't just say boundaries to your child. Be boundaries. If you aren't yet, get to work on yourself. It will pay off both for you and for him.
Well, I thought this was a class y'all signed up at Boundaries with your kids, and now it seems like everything's pointing at you guys, isn't it? Snap. All right. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you a very, very practical example of boundaries. Thinking about it, doing it with purpose, having a mission, planting a crop, getting the harvest that you want, okay? That's not going to be about kids. Anybody here grew up on a farm? I did. Oh, good. What's your name? What was your name?
Seth.
Seth. All right. All right. Levi's dad? All right. All right. Okay, now I'm putting them together. All right. Here's what happens on a farm. First, the farmer has to know who he is. He's a farmer, right? Now you might think, well, yeah. Well, sometimes it takes us a while to figure out who we are, like Rick Lawrence was talking about. Of the closer we get to Jesus, and when we identify who is Jesus, Jesus then turns right around and tells us who we are. So it's very important. That's our first step, okay? So the farmer looks out at his field. Now there's nothing going to grow if he doesn't put the work in it. So what he has to do, he has to think. He has to think, put time into thinking. What is my crop going to be this year? Before he does anything. What is my crop going to be? So he decides, this is the plot of land I'm going to plow. I'm going to go plow it, and I'm going to plow and plow and plow and plow, because he has to get that soil churned up, ready to be planted. You can't just plant it on hard dirt. He's got to fertilize the field. The field has to even be prepared before that. So with that, he then thinks, okay, I'm going to plant corn, beans, and tomatoes. Nothing else. Corn, beans, and tomatoes. So then he thinks, where am I going to go get my seed? I have to make a decision. Where's the seed going to come from? He literally has to invest somewhere to get the good seed that he wants. He brings it back, and then he has to go through the huge thing of plowing acres and acres of land to be able to plant this seed. This makes sound a little funny, isn't it? You hearing it out there? A little buzz in it? No? Okay, good. I didn't want to be a distraction for you. So he goes ahead, does the hard work of planting rows and rows of corn straight down, rows and rows of beans, rows and rows of tomatoes. Great. So now what we see is brown dirt. So he sets up time where all through the night he's irrigating. He literally has to move with other people huge things of irrigation through the night when it hasn't rained for a while. Then he has to be on his knees when the hail comes and the storm comes. He has to be like, God, please don't let the predators come and eat my crop, because he's not going to have any money. He has to put a lot of time and energy. He has to talk to other farmers. He has to maintain his equipment. Time. Part of the title on this teaching was boundaries in time, boundaries in technology. He has to be looking. He has to be looking on, okay, now I can't be looking at the TV all night long. I can't be doing this all night long because I'm on purpose. I'm living on mission. I've got to grow this crop. Corn, beans, tomatoes. He's focused. He knows what he's doing. Okay? Watering, 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 watering. Finally, you start seeing green come up. Is he done? Oh, no. He's just getting started. Has to constantly put time, the whole growing season. He has to talk to other farmers, relationships. He has to be saying no to some things and yes to other things. Boundaries on things, okay? So then finally the crop comes up. He's got his what? His corn, his beans, tomatoes. They pick for the whole season. He takes it to market. He got the harvest that he put his mission on. He gets his money. He made good choices. So things go well. Now, right down the road, there's somebody that bought some land. And you know, they said they were a farmer. They had the land. They had all the equipment. They even had some seed left over by the people who sold them the land. They didn't think about anything they wanted to sow. They didn't even want to think about their harvest. They just knew, I want to be a farmer too, and I got this land, and I got this seed, so they just go ahead and throw the seed. I want corn, beans, and tomatoes too. What comes up? Wheat. Wheat. Now, if I'm not mistaken, if they go out in that whole field of scattered wheat, if there's one plant of corn, that's considered a weed in this whole field of wheat. What happens up in the counseling room is now the one farmer looks over at the other farmer and says, you know something? That's not fair. I've had it so hard in my life. Look at them. They got the corn, the beans, and tomatoes. That's not fair. I'm just a victim of life. No, they just didn't think on purpose. They didn't have a mission. They didn't think about the harvest that they're trying to grow. This is a huge lesson in boundaries. It takes a lot of thought, a lot of thought. But I always like to use that gardening example because it just kind of hits it home when you're raising kids, gosh, with anybody as a matter of fact, of really having to think, who am I first? What am I splashing off? What's my purpose? And in raising children, they're on loan. God has chosen all of you. God knows the character He wants to develop in your children. So it's imperative that you all learn how to look at your own boundaries, how to look at who are you, what unresolved stuff do you have going inside of you, and am I thinking about the purpose in developing the character in this child so they can walk into the life that God's created them to walk in. Make sense? Yeah? Good. Now make sure you keep your questions coming because we're going to do that at the very end. They ask you about, okay? All right. Now, I have these. If you're around Living Faith Alliance Church, you see these a lot. And the reason I have these out here is we're talking about living on purpose, living on mission, and like I said, I'm not talking about living missionally. I'm talking about just in your own house, getting up with a mission. And what I hear a lot, even with the 4 foundations here, I'm guilty of it as well, is I don't have time for this. We don't have time to sit around the table, have a dinner. We don't have time to have these family discussions. All we can do is get home. They have to do their homework. They have the 6 soccer games all week long. They have the dance classes. They have X, Y, and Z. So we don't even have time to do what we want to do. I call it the calendar monster. In order for you to really set up, you and your spouse, you and an accountability partner, whoever, if you're married, if you're not married, have an accountability partner, sit down, write out your priorities. What's important? What kind of harvest do you want to grow? What kind of seed do you want to plant? And if it's this, then you better get the right seed, and you've got to put time boundaries on yourself. You've got to say yes to some things and no to some things. You just have to, or else you're not going to make it, okay? Now, I'm going to show the last video And it is wild. You're going to hear the F-bomb dropped. You're going to hear some other words dropped. I did get it cleared with Pastor Greg Hill, one of our pastors. And the reason I absolutely love this video is because it says exactly what I wanted to bring today. And just like Rick Lawrence said today, when the girl said Jesus was a badass. You know, we're raising kids. We can't get so hung up. Not that I'm advocating cussing at all, but we have to be able to get past some of the stuff our kids are saying, doing, and thinking in order to open up and engage in conversation and not shut them down for every little thing we get offended by. When I was sitting under Tony Campolo, he had said damn in one of his messages. And he goes, you know something? Some of you are so hung up that I said damn that you've missed the entire content of the seminar. And he was right. Oh, man. So I just want to let you know you're going to hear some cursing. Listen to the message outside of the cursing. And as Greg Hill did say, he goes, and it's a lot of, it's like taken from a movie, that Hollywood does an excellent job telling us what our problem is in our culture. They do a horrible job on the solution of our problems in our culture, but they do a magnificent job in showing us what our problems are, okay? So, I'm going to show you this video. I have transcribed the entire video without, I've changed the words. You're not going to see any F-bombs on your paper or anything like that. But I have transcribed it out so you can actually take it home with you and actually read again what this guy is saying. I don't believe he's coming from a faith standpoint, but I don't know, maybe he is. And in the places where you talk about purpose and what you're letting in, you will see me hold up the Word of God. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when he's saying you've got to understand your purpose and why you're doing everything. You'll hear it, all right? Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of my favorite, it's become one of my favorite videos in the past 2 weeks. How you like that? Here we go. Y'all still with me? Yeah. Amen. Come on here.
Your freedom and happiness has been restricted by a story that you never double-checked. You never double-checked the narrative you never cross-referenced the narrative that you were fed. You believed it hook, line, and sinker, and now your happiness will be diminished. People in general do not want their belief systems to be challenged. They want to hear things that pump them up. They don't want to be consistently challenged. So the reason why what people often do is they use groupthink in order to save themselves mental energy, and then they parrot back the opinions of the herd because they think that gets them approval and safety. Literally, the mental prisons that you're initially fed that stifle you down, and then now you are the jailer. You are your own worst enemy. These guys that are like, I don't agree ever could ghosts are the best. He literally is his own jailer now. He is hurting himself now. It's so crazy. Most people, however, have a very groupthink strategy. The problem with a groupthink strategy is that you have the sheep and the wolves. The wolves eat the sheep. Everybody is willing to pay to be told what to think and what to do. Basically, the wolves are people that are not mentally lazy. If you want to be a wolf in life, you have to be okay with a high degree of uncertainty, ambiguity. Realize that you are in a cultural hypnosis. So the biggest thing that I've realized over the past year, I'd say, because I like to share my biggest epiphanies back on the 7th of the year, is the severity of mass cultural hypnosis. It is a lot more severe than I ever really understood. We're all influenced by our social environment. We are not isolated little fucking islands. We are permeable membranes. So what I realized over time, you have to be very controlling of what you choose to let into your headspace. Okay? Massively controlling. You have to be aware of what's getting in. Don't let in shit that you have thought through and that you don't want to let in. Okay? So, if you want to move ahead in the world, you have to really pull yourself out of easy thinking. Don't look for the easy truths. Some truths are easy. Keep things simple, but never simpler than they actually are. Make it as simple as it can be, but don't make it simpler than it actually is. You have to choose your influences very carefully, and choose what am I putting into myself very carefully. Then what you have to do is you have to have a very strong personal boundary of anything that's not moving you in that direction. But to do this, I think, to make it practical and pull it off, you have to have a reason why you're doing it. There has to be something that motivates you to do that. With increased purpose, it's like your gravity increases and it increases your personal boundaries. Most people's behavior day to day, if you think about it, is coping behavior. They're just trying to cope. They don't feel great, and they're just trying to fucking cope. Assume failure. Assume that you will be a failure. Assume that failure is the default unless you fix it. You have to be on top of your shit. Every minute that goes by, if you're on a life mission, you're going by, it's not happening, you're losing time. This is not up for debate, you're losing time. If you use the time better, you could have done more. If you use the time worse, you could do less. Think of a mission. Think of the fucking higher universal values that you would have to embody to accomplish it, and just spend your time moving in that direction. Think bigger thoughts. What I realized what was satisfying to me was finding higher values and the struggle and journey of embodying those values. That's where I really found happiness.
Yeah!
It's time for question and answers now. Any of it. Y'all look shell-shocked. Yes, Jessica, be my icebreaker.
I don't have a question so much as just like watching this.
Mhm.
It's stunning to me that the people I know who say this don't love Jesus. I have people in my life who are so driven and focused, and they know that it means saying no to things and only letting certain things in, and they have no idea who Jesus is.
Yes.
But the people I know who follow Jesus never talk in language like
Yep.
that.
You're right. That's why I wanted to show this. Because this is where we have to get. And not just keep looking at it like, oh, this is, That's why I fell in love with this. And I was like, okay, I just have to do this. Taking the chance. Just like Rick Lord, just taking the chance I may offend or I may challenge, but this is what Jesus had me bring today. Yeah. I think Jesus would give a hallelujah if he was here with me right now. It is yes. Yeah. Anybody else? We've got 30 minutes. Lots of questions and answers.
Are you just talking about like the cursing or?
No. I mean so kind of what he said about what Rick Lawrence said about like people will say Jesus is nice, and then like that girl said Jesus is badass. Like I feel like a lot of people I know who follow Jesus, we have this very like watered down mentality of like what to fight for, or what to expect from life, or what to say yes to, or what to say no to, and we just kind of like cope, and you know, like it's just like we don't have to make these decisive decisions. But then like I've worked with I'm thinking of one coworker I had in particular who is so motivated and driven, and he's so willing to make sacrifices and to say no to things and to say yes to things and all of these things because he's driven and he has a purpose and it has nothing to do with Jesus. But he gets that.
Yes.
And I feel like so many people I know, including myself, who follow Jesus, it's just this kind of like, well, I'll take it as it comes. Like, We don't have to have hard lines. We don't have to say, it doesn't have to be black and white. So I think what Rick Lawrence was saying about that fierceness, I think is very lost.
Yes. And in the part of this session is I'm to bring like just real, in a sense, stories, trends that I see in the counseling room. I see a lot of Christians. I've come to a place in my life, I make a distinction between the word Christian, which is little Christ, and followers of Jesus. I've learned they're two very different things. And the reason I say that is I do meet a lot of Christian folk, somewhere where I used to be and I'm trying not to be, because I don't want to send a message at all to anybody that I have it all together with life and boundaries. No. Every single day, it's always a challenge, and I always see where I could have done better, and I messed it up. But I've had to learn to say, okay, then what steps do I need to take to fix it? And the first thing I need to do is say, okay, Jesus, save me. And give me the wisdom to know how to step forward in this in order to then learn this boundary better. Yeah. But folks who I am calling Christians, and I go in that, is they've said yes to Jesus, and it's usually way back in their childhood, and they're very happy they're going to heaven, and they're angry with Jesus because their life is not happy. The term is, it's always something else. It's always something else. And isn't he supposed to fix it? If he's loving, isn't he supposed to fix it? I'm a Christian, and look at all these things I do for other people, so why am I having such a hard life? I just can't wait to get to heaven and get over with this. Now, I know that's not the fierce Jesus we're talking about. And so a follower of Jesus comes in, and they come in just off the front lines, and they are just angry, they're sad, they're bruised, and they say, okay, I've got to sit down for a while because I got to get back to the battlefield, but in order to fight appropriately and have that purpose and that mission, I got to take a breather and step off the field for just a little bit for me to go back on and get replenished. Two different perspectives. Yeah. Questions? Let them flow, because honestly, I do believe we are all in the same boat in one way or the other. And I do believe we all fail in the same way. I do believe we are all even at the foot of the cross. So your questions, what you're going to say, I really think will help other people. It says in Revelation that we are healed by our testimony. So bring them on. Bring your questions on. Yeah. Donald. I love these questions.
So I think just the thought of like knowing kind of family of origin stuff, and like seeing kind of even the way my sister parents and like kind of what's been modeled of how quickly identity can be wrapped up in like successes of a parent, or like how well behaved your child is. And I mean, Sam's he's about to be 10 months old, but I feel like I feel like to be proactively working in the opposite direction of like my identity is secure in Jesus, and I'm parenting intentionally. The goal would be to like secure, like my identity wouldn't be shaped by my relationship with my son. So like I guess I just know that that's already like something that's been modeled, and I have like a tendency that would most likely become natural. So like maybe to talk about kind of how to proactively not do that more. Like I don't want it to become something where like I'm like a codependent, like in that dynamic where like I'm needing to have my son behave perfectly or else something's wrong with me.
Oh, so like over-identifying with him? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Or is that?
Or being like your identity being enmeshed in like his performance or who he is.
Oh, okay. All right. That's a biggie that I get a lot. That it's even when the child misbehaves or does something wrong, then I hear you have shamed this last name and this is who you are. And even if the child begins to move towards certain careers or whatever, no, that's not who you are. This is who we are. That kind of a thing. And You know, in the very, and I'm going to get to you, but the very last thing I want any of you to take out of this class is that there's condemnation or a critical assessment of what you're doing. Even to go, oh my gosh, I've got to leave this place, and I've got to have purpose, and I've got a mission, I've never thought about this. Because the truth is, I don't know if I've ever met anybody, I'm 51, I'm 52, I don't know if I've ever met anybody, I don't know everybody in the world, that has come from a set of parents that have been just sharp as tacks on boundaries, on relationship skills, on time management, on all of it. Because the book in Genesis said that we are all destined for failure in relationships. So, I would like all of us to leave this class, and you know something? The first thing I have to start with is myself and say, okay, where did I come from? And did I learn all this stuff about boundaries? And I would say probably 80% of you, if not more, is going to say no. I never heard the word boundaries, or that you're allowed to say yes or no. Hold on just a second. So don't beat yourself up. The whole purpose is start with yourself. Look at your family of origin. Look at any issues that you have within yourself. I told the last class to actually, when everybody's in bed, to start writing out on a piece of paper the storm that goes on inside of you. When your child misbehaves, what comes up inside of you? Is it identity statements? And we had an identity question in the last session, and the first thing I thought of was when Jesus got baptized, and then he immediately got sent out into the wilderness, and after 40 days of not eating, he was in a very weak state. Now, y'all probably can understand all that by being in a weak state. And then the enemy came and started attacking his identity. If you're this, prove this, prove this, prove this. So therefore, when little Samuel grows up and starts becoming who God's made him to be, and it's your guys' job to help guide him and sand off those rough little edges. I call it heavenly sandpaper when he's coming up against you like, argh! So never discipline in anger, but in that moment asking yourself, what's coming up in my heart? Is it more about him right now and me helping him, or is it more about, oh no, oh no, oh no?
Yeah.
You know, and then that will be up for you to start exploring, why is my identity, why is his performance coming back on me? Mm-hmm. Make sense? But a lot with family of origin and what your expectations would be. Calvin?
To connect to that, what are some suggestions for teaching your child boundaries, some safe boundaries you might share as a family?
What do you mean?
Develop, pray about, use the core foundations.
Yeah.
What are some boundaries that you would use there, just to introduce your child at the appropriate age to, actually talk about the word boundaries?
Oh, I think from birth, because I think with anything, I mean, it's just basically teaching them, what they're responsible for, their emotions, their behavior, their attitude, but also really the parents knowing themselves and practicing healthy boundaries. So the parent would know what they're responsible for. So an example would be, say you come to me and I say, Calvin, can you please go get me a cup of coffee? And you say, actually, Lois, no, I can't because I have to go teach a lesson. Well, I may respond like, I can't believe you're not going to go get me a cup of coffee. Like, what's that about? You would already know you're not responsible for my attitude. You're not responsible for my behavior. You're not responsible to get me coffee. You practice a healthy boundary. You said no. I, on the other hand, did not respect your boundary, and I acted out. But you being able to separate yourself and say, actually, that's not my job to help you feel better. That's something, Lois, you have to work out. And you can say, Lois, get it together. You know better than this. So it's very important that the parents themselves practice those boundaries, because as Rick Lawrence said, it's you that really transforms your kid, and really that shapes them. So as you practice those healthy boundaries, it'll and as you and Paula sit down and practice these things and show them how to do it and set the time aside to do it and explain to them what you're doing, and you're not allowing other things to come in, you're making sure you're saying no to other things so you can do this, they'll start learning how to do it from you guys. Like as you practice it. Basically with anything. Does that make sense? Is that answering your question? You there?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. No, I was like, is he all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
I have a, in some, I don't really care if anybody thinks it's silly because it's a.
Good for you.
I-
That's taking help. That's no what you're not responsible for. Everybody else will think it's silly. You're not.
I was gonna
responsible
say
for
this may seem silly, but I don't care.
that. Good. That's a little edgy.
A thing I've struggled with, like my son is very strong-willed and he's a year old, so almost a year old. So I've started to set boundaries with him, like no, he cannot. I'm not moving that. He's not gonna touch it. But sometimes I feel like bad, like if I have to like tap his hand, and I know that I'm not doing it out of anger, because sometimes I have to put him in his crib and walk away because I am angry. But like, even if you're not disciplining in anger and you feel bad, is that like a root issue? Like if he cries or I know I hurt his feelings or whatever, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be how long you feel bad, because I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, if your child's crying, upset, and you're like, oh yeah, go ahead, whatever you're going to do, be mad, whatever. I am not going to say that it's a problem that you feel bad. Now, if that hangs on you for like a half an hour or an hour or 2 hours, then it's going to be a root issue of like something, you know, like you've somewhere along the line had to take responsibility for someone else's emotions. And it's coming up. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of piggybacking on that.
Good. Let's keep piggybacking.
So for like us, like Lindsay and I and our husbands, our babies are still really little. So I think, like, so can we just talk maybe a little bit about the balance of teaching them appropriate boundaries and creating a safe space? Because I feel like, so for us, like if I put my baby on the floor, there's a million things he can get into, and it's an unrealistic expectation to say like, well, I'm going to set this boundary that you don't stick your finger in the sockets, and you know I'm going to discipline you when you don't, because he's a baby. So like, where's that? I don't want to never say no to him, and like there never be things he can't have, because then I feel like he'll never learn that there's things he can't have.
Sure.
But I don't want to put unfair expectations of how he'll obey or what he's capable of in that. So not even specific to us maybe, but how do you find that balance? Like, how do you find that balance with your specific child?
I'll be honest, I don't know.
Does it depend on the
Honestly,
child? I feel like it depends on
Yeah, I think honestly it would depend on completely that unique child, the unique mom that God's chosen, and that whole, you know, Jesus, I really believe that would be you just listening to the Spirit of God, because it's already, the foundation's there.
Yeah.
You know what you can't expect, and just going with and being flexible, and that it's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to add to them.
Oh, we keep piggybacking. We might make it all the way to the ceiling. Keep on going.
All right. With what you said, I believe like you can't set your child up to fail every time. So like if you know if you have tons of stuff, then you have to work on like what can I remove slightly.
Yeah.
But with your situation, with it on the shelf, I know with our kid's 5 now, but we would pinch at the hand, and if he touched it, and I'd be like, this is a no, this is a yes, and giving him those boundaries, and it helped. And by the time my kid's 5 now, it hurt at first, seeing him cry all the time, but after a while, it doesn't faze him at all now. He grows out of that, and you know, and he learns his boundaries, and it makes it so much easier. So it's tough now, but later it'll be easier. But yeah,
Good.
that
Good.
helps
That's
out.
great.
That's helpful.
No,
Yes,
very
that's
helpful.
awesome. I mean, that just went along with, if you make good choices, things go well. If you make a bad choice, you suffer. So I mean, that's awesome, Sharon. Thank you.
The other thing is, don't not discipline them because you feel bad when you discipline.
That's that number one obstacle up there. Mm-hmm. This is nice, huh? They're going to say, I understand why she
The
said
other
that.
thing too, what Sharon was saying, everything can't be no.
That's right.
And let them know what they can.
Give them
Yes.
Yeah, I like
Yes.
Yes, you can color in your coloring books, but you can't color them all.
Mm-hmm. That develops a choice.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. No, her husband is, though. Oh, that's okay. We're on national TV. No, we really aren't. I'd be freaking out. We got time for a couple more questions, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to need 4 people to hand out papers for me. And all these papers up here have all the bullet points of the videos. They have the authors of them. I have also up here, like, what is a boundary, resistance to boundaries, myths about boundaries, the 10 laws of boundaries, a whole bunch of stuff up here for you. Yeah. Yes?
Mine. So I think I'm just gonna continue. Like I think this is like I feel it's like a little daunting.
It's what?
Like I feel like
Daunting?
Yeah. So
I can see it on your face.
yeah. I think I haven't yet really thought about. I mean, we haven't like started discipline or anything. And Sam's 10 months old, so it's mostly like making sure his basic needs are met. And I feel like so much
Making
less
sure he's what?
his basic needs are met. Like
Oh,
he's, like,
gotcha. Okay, I thought you said something about a biscuit in the bed or something. I thought I didn't know what he just said right
That's
there.
right.
Okay, I was just making sure.
So I think even like how do I feel like to work on my own issues from family of origin stuff of like intentions for how I'm parenting, like I don't even know how to articulate this well. Like I just feel like I can already see like a tendency of like my parenting being potentially about me, of like what someone else will think of me, what you will think of me in that. So I feel like I want to parent in a way where I'm focusing on setting him up for success and it being about like establishing those like healthy patterns for him. And I like even just things coming to mind from like my own childhood of like ways that my mom like had like specifically said like when I disobeyed, like later she told me it embarrassed her, and like so motivation became like a guilt and shame based thing versus like I know what's right and wrong because it's right and wrong. So I don't want to do that to my son. I don't want to like repeat that.
Well, you already have a knowledge of it.
Right.
You're identifying it already, and I honestly think that you've already got enough of a knowledge base to be able to. I mean, I just encourage you to recognize that God made you and that you were supposed to invade planet Earth on a certain day, and he also knows the day you're going to go home, okay? And then later on he knew that Donald and Jessica were going to get married on something. We just have to stop right there. So, that was a nice video like that. I just loved it. Then they had a little baby Samuel. So making sure you keep in your head, God already knows who Samuel's going to be. God already has it lined up. All your job is, you can't fix the default of failure. Only Jesus, when Jesus died on that cross, he was the only one that could fix your default of failure. So it's imperative that you answer, I'm talking to everybody, that you answer the question, who is Jesus? It's imperative. You got to answer it. Who is he to you? And let him then rename you. And then, with that kind of thinking, you'll be able to understand that this little gift, Samuel Harry, is uniquely designed by God. And all you have to do is stay in that center with Jesus splashing all over you and you splashing on Samuel Harry in order to get Samuel Harry to death. And it's not going to reflect on you. Because what we want is just the image of Jesus shining off of Samuel Harry as it shines off of you and Jessica. And I'm just keeping that. We're completely separate. You're on mission. You're on mission, and God's chosen you as his father to help this little boy get to his mission. I feel like we need to have church up in here right now. That's exactly right. That's right. Tears of joy and healings flowing.